Welcome back to the Automotive Market Minute, in which may or may not take just over a minute. Introductions. My name is Steven Georgella, CEO here at Fountain Forward.
My name is Phil Tripotowski, Strategy Director here at Fountain Forward.
And I'm James Sifko, Fountain Forward's economist in residence.
All right, we're going to jump into it, going in and talking about the month of June in the month of July. We're going to talk about the Fountain Ford dealership performance as an aggregate, talk about car buying intentions. How does the consumer actually feel about buying a vehicle? Mr. Sifko is going to talk about home buying, and is this a tailwind for where the automotive space is actually going? We'll talk about national inventory, sales, interest rates, etc. And then we're going to talk about a dealership in which is going for the throat in a market where a lot of dealers are very apprehensive. Let's talk about the aggregate data. So, caveat to start out here, very important. CDK, e-leads. So we decided to omit a good amount of information from the dealers in which had incomplete data. So you're still talking about just around 60% of all of our dealers here. Traffic down 2.67% month over month, about 1% down in leads. We'll call that negligible to say the least. Appointments down 9%. Very, very important there, coming off of a reasonably good May. New sales down 2.16%. Used sales down 4.74%. Now, before we go to the next slide here, keep in mind, even if sales were flat year over year, grosses are compressed. They're crazy compressed. So what's happening is if a dealer sold 100 last year and they sold 98 this year, the actual impact on the bottom line is drastically different than it would have been only 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 12 months ago, when I would get on calls. Hey guys, what's your average gross per vehicle on a new vehicle? Oh, we're at 5,200. What are you guys at right now? 2,150. So you could be even year over year and your bottom line is really sweating it. So the next one here is an actual look at year over year. Now the caveat here is this: we've added a lot of dealers year over year. Our system drives a lot of traffic. It drives a lot of lead volume. We focus with Fountain Forward University on setting appointments, et cetera, et cetera. So just remember, when we look at year over year, we're putting our system in place. We want to see these types of numbers increase. So, there's a lot of context that we could give you behind these numbers, but we always want to show you year over year numbers. So we have these dealerships' actual year over year numbers, even if we weren't working with them back then. And again, with our growth, there's a lot of dealers that are now in the system that would not have been in the system back in 2023. Over to the wizard, Mr. Sifko.
If it feels like you've been through hell and back over the last 3 years, you have. This is data going all the way back to 1978. It's University of Michigan Car Buying Intentions Survey. And it's a simple survey. It asked respondents, is it a good time to buy a car, or is it a bad time to buy a car? Bad time here is in red, good time is in green. And just measuring the good time indicator or response, we're in the 4th percentile going all the way back to 1978. As you all know, 78 is a lifetime in the car business. So conditions, or at least consumer conditions, and it's for various reasons, are not very good. It went from lockdowns to lack of inventory, to price of cars, and now to interest rates. And pretty soon we think it's going to translate to personal balance sheet issues. So this is a great slide, and it's great from a business strategy perspective. A lot of the other costs surrounding owning a car are skyrocketing, along with the other inflationary effects that we talked about last month. This is parts. Car part prices are skyrocketing. This is maintenance. So labor costs are skyrocketing. And finally, these are insurance premiums. And so really the punchline here is that in terms of parts and service, you need to be relentlessly and remorselessly raising prices all the time. As a matter of fact, tomorrow morning, you should probably get in your pricing system and raise all the car part prices. And I don't really care what you're paying the mechanics, but what you're billing them out at, that rate needs to go higher. And finally, over in the body shop, there are more insurance premiums sloshing around. So when you get insurance deals, your estimators need to be quoting higher prices. If not, you are losing money on the table. And as you guys all know, this part of your business is a very powerful drop to the bottom line.
Real quick, I'm going to make sure I highlight this for our sizzle reel. Chief economist here, James Sifko, says to all of you dealers, tomorrow morning when you get in, we're raising the prices on our parts. When it comes down to billable hours, we are raising the price per hour. You heard it here first. from Chief Economist James Sifko. Next slide, please.
This is the balance sheet issue we talked about 2 slides ago. And this is the estimated excess household savings, where consumers blow their savings, but I'm sure we all find creative ways as consumers to do so. You can see it build up during the pandemic. People aren't eating out. People aren't doing anything. They're not going on vacation. The slow burn, this is really old news. We really, right around February, we crossed over to, hey, consumers, we've spent it all, but it will be an ongoing story. The punchline here is, if you do have an ability to have zero down payment financing options, you need to keep one of those in your back pocket, or you need to get one.
Good luck finding those. Let's keep going.
And finally, we do have something here that we think is going to be a general tailwind here over the next few years. And that is, we've talked about existing home sales last month. We've now stacked new sales on top of them. And you can see that this chart, which goes back to about 2000, you can see in the left 1/3, that was the effect of the '08 financial crisis. We've been in a slow recovery in the housing markets amid really powerful rising prices. And now you can see, though, over the last year and a half, both new and existing home sales are lower, and the combination of both of them are down at the bottom of '08 levels. So the tailwind here is that consumers who are 6 months away from buying a house behave a lot differently than consumers that are 6 years away. And a giant portion of consumers that are probably going to trade up the housing ladder are probably deferring that decision. And hopefully that means that they're going to want a nice set of wheels in the garage while they wait.
Moving on, looking at new and used days supply of inventory. Now, keep in mind, these numbers were impacted by the CDK outage, but you can see new inventory and used inventory trending higher. Let's look at sales. Again, impacted by CDK. Across all of our stores, especially our ones using CDK, many of them had to overcome a lot of hurdles. CDK was closed down from about the 19th of June all the way up to early July for many stores. We are seeing that be reflected here in these overall national numbers.
And we are hearing during the month of July so far, we are hearing the bump so far. So it's early on in July. We're getting through the first 10 days of July. This will be released here around the 12th or 13th of July. We are hearing a bump. We are hearing a little bit of a heater to start out the month of July. So people are coming back. The July 4th week, if you will, was like a whole week off for a lot of people. So honestly, if you think about it, while it was a closeout almost, kind of good timing when it comes down to if we were going to have an oh shit moment when it comes down to software breaking down. Keep in mind, that's kind of a build-up moment. If somebody's that close during the month of June and they're getting, oh, I'm pretty much going to buy, they're going to kind of push that out into the first week or two in July. So we are seeing that so far. My bet would be when we do have the data come in for our August episode talking about July, I think we're going to see some juice from the month of June.
Correct. But to that point, this is looking at low APR financing, specifically 0% financing is down to 2.4% to start July. It was at 2.9% in June. It's at its lowest point in quite some time here. Less than 3% APRs. Those were at a high point in February, but since then declined in March, April, May, up slightly in June, but down to a 3-month low in July. So it looks as if this incentive support coming from manufacturers is actually starting to peel off a little bit. And back to, that comment that I made earlier, if you are looking for a 0% offer, you're going to have to be a rather lucky consumer. Looking at average auto loan rates, I just want to kind of go through this quickly. So far in July, the average used rate has declined a bit, as has the average new rate declined. The Fed, Jerome Powell, came out. Looks like his tone may be changing slightly. It looks like the market is starting to price in rate cuts starting in September. Who knows if that will actually happen? But to kind of tie all of this together and show what does the Fed funds rate look like with respect to national auto sales, we have this fantastic graph that James Sivko put together. So James, why don't you tell us what we're looking at here?
Well, in order to get these two instruments here singing in the same tune, we flipped over Fed funds and we inverted it. So you can see back in the 70s, Fed funds, low or negative effect on car and truck sales because interest rates were so high. And you can see it dropping all throughout the last 40-year period from the early 70s all the way to the 2008 financial crisis. And you can see the interest rates help boost car and truck sales along with a number of other factors. And then it becomes a little bit less clear as we get through the financial crisis, but there still is a relationship there. And hopefully, when the cavalry comes and we do get some rate cuts here over the next 12 months, that could be a boost to sales volumes. So this is U.S. sales volumes in blue, and in orange is the Fed funds.
And what I find interesting, and Mr. Sivko has an exorbitant amount of experience in this sector, if you will, or in this area. I find it interesting. I've been talking to Phil on the Market Minute now for the better part of 18 months to 2 years. And all I hear over and over is, well, it looks like the market has priced in. It looks like the market has priced in. It looks like the market has priced in. And quick shout out to Kip Harridge and the perma bulls out there. I'm a conservative, right? When it comes down to fiscally, I'm a conservative. And I just sit here and I've been talking to Phil now since November 2022. And I'm like, but this doesn't make any sense. It's like, yeah, Steve, but people get $1 and they spend $1.05. That's what they do. That's what Americans do. James has been saying that to me. And so, I sit there and it's like, I look at the car dealers. Guys, Phil and I walked into a car dealership and we watched them put on a 96-month. Phil, you know what I'm talking about? A 96-month deal to make sure that he could get it done. And the consumer's sitting there and it's like, yeah, I'm going to get this deal done. I'm excited, etc. And it's like, when I watched that deal go down, I felt like the perma bulls were just sitting there going like this, because it just seems as if, and I don't come from this area. I just learned this stuff with Phil. I make things simple. It just seems like it's like every little tiny number in which they could use as an excuse to keep the run going, they're going to. It's like, well, I can sell a vehicle at 96 months. Well, I could keep up sales that way. There's a negative on the other side of it. And are we just kicking the can and kicking the can and kicking the can? And Mr. Sivko, a little bit more tenured than me, if you will, a veteran, if you will. I just don't, after a while, I'm just like, well, how long does it go for? James, did you have something?
Yeah, we need to keep in mind that every economic cycle is basically a game of Jenga. If we look at this one here, some rate cuts will allow us to stack some blocks on the top here and maybe have some better numbers.
Gotcha.
So
right.
We're in the middle of a game of Jenga.
And the last thing there, we're still not feeling the full effect of the last rate hike that took place. James, how long have rates stayed consistent? About 12 months?
Yes.
They take 18 months to feel the full effect into the economy. So we still haven't found this new normal yet. And that's why typically, as you do start to see the Fed cut rates, they're doing so because of a reason. Unemployment is trending a bit higher. I know we didn't touch on that today, but the labor market is starting to get into a little bit of a better balance. But at the same time, while CDK was down, it looks as if national sales are falling. Still, across Fountain Forward stores, we are seeing some dealers crush it in the market. So, Steve, why don't you walk us through this little case study here?
If you will, and I will. So this is my message here. Keep this in mind. We're going to use a boating reference, okay? Everybody's being a little bit more conservative, right? I got to control my expenses. I got to pull back on this. I got to pull back on that. That's happening a lot. Respect. I hear you. So as all the boats at one time are pulling back their throttle a little bit, if you kept at the same throttle level, you're pulling ahead of them. We know that. I got it. Well, then there's a couple handfuls, maybe 3 handfuls of dealers that are putting the throttle down a little bit more. They are going to acquire market share at a discount. That is what I want you to remember. They're going to acquire market share at a discount. And what that means is when we do these reality checks, each one of our dealers has what we call the competitive pool. When you start with Fountain Forward, you get to choose your competitors, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the pie. Now, if the market goes down 10% year over year, the pie has shrunk. If you go down 5%, you've taken 5% from the pool effectively. I want you to keep in mind that as others are pulling off the throttle, you can keep the same throttle and you will take share, or you can crank up the throttle and you will quickly take market share from them. This is an example of a dealer. When you look at their actual sales from July of last year all the way through, you'd be like, oh, they're selling more than they were at the year previously, but it's nothing special. Well, if you look at the graph on the right, that shows that they're taking actual share and they're taking it over and over and over and over and over. And then you look at the month of June when there was a tremendous pullback in their market and they said, well, I kind of thought that I was going to beat you up a little bit, but instead I decided to go directly out after your throat. And that's what happened. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they took over the number one spot in their state for the month of June for the second time in their history. So that's really the close up there, is just remember, when others pull back, you get to win at a discount. And any other comments from Phil or James before I close up here, guys?
I talked to the owner and the GM of this store actually this morning. They've taken 7% of market share so far year to date. They said, we want 10. So we're going after 10 for the second half of the year.
To give you guys some perspective there, taking 10% in a year is absurd. I think it may have been done one time in the history of Fountain Ford, and it might have been 0 times. So with that said, I know you guys get a lot of passion during these calls. The reason why you get a lot of passion is because we study these car dealerships. We're studying the economy, and we're not afraid to try to play Nostradamus, because we truly believe that this information is not being presented to you the way it's supposed to be. And we here at Fountain Ford are here to present it to you in a manner that you can digest, and you can raise your prices on your parts. You can raise your cost per billable hour, and you can make more money. On behalf of my wonderful friends, Phil and Mr. James Sivko, my name is Steven Drugella. God willing, we will see you again next month on the Automotive Market Minute. Woo!